Hey guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about glazes and all the fun things about glazing. Okay. There are many different types of glazes in the classroom, and you need to know the difference between what glazes do what and what looks like what when it comes out of the kiln. Okay. Very first thing we're going to talk about is something called the underglaze. Okay. The underglaze comes in two different types of bottles, but it essentially is the same thing. An underglaze is special because you can put the underglaze on both fired clay, like this is bisqued, it's already gone through the kiln once, or you can also put underglaze on clay before it goes in when it's in the leather hard or bone dry stage. Either stage, this glaze can go on. And the really great thing about underglaze is it comes out the exact color that it is in the bottle. So if you apply this orange glaze to your tile, it's going to come out looking orange. It will not change its appearance in the kiln. So that's one great thing about underglaze. Another thing about underglaze is that when it comes out of the kiln, it does not have any shiny effect to it. So it doesn't have a clear coat built in. So when the underglaze goes through the kiln and it comes out, you will have to then apply the clear coat to the underglaze, and it will have to go in the kiln again in order for it to get nice and glossy. Okay, so just keep that in mind. From underglaze to our Lowfire glaze. We talked about this in class, and that's what we're using on our little drape molds. Okay. Lowfire glaze is both glossy or flat, depending on which one you choose. This is the LG series. It is liquid gloss, so you know that's going to come out, and it's going to be nice and shiny. Okay. You'll also notice, if you read the label, which I'm sure none of you do, that this is fired at cone 5. I'm sorry, cone 05. That's very important. It's fired at cone 05. Okay, and that's why it's considered a low fire glaze, because of the cone that it gets fired. Remember, a cone is a measurement of temperature. So those are our low fire glazes. Low fire glazes have the clear coat, this clear coat, already built in. So it will come out either shiny or flat, but the clear coat's built in, and you do not need to then cover it with the clear coat. Okay? And just like the underglazes and like all glazes, it requires 3 coats. Moving on, we have something called our Highfire glazes. Okay? And these glazes get fired at a higher temperature than the low fire glazes. Okay? If you read the label, which you should, where is the label? There it is. You'll see that this gets fired to cone 5-6. Okay, right there, cone 5-6. So that gets fired at a hotter temperature than your low fire. Therefore, you can never put these two types of glazes on the same piece in the same kiln, okay, because they get fired at different temperatures. Okay? But the high fire glaze is going to also have a clear coat built in, and you do not need to add a clear coat. The only glaze that requires a clear coat is the engobe and the underglaze. Okay? So this is the high fire, and we'll get into using these on our coil pots. It's our engobe glaze that we used on our little slab boxes. We've already used this, and remember, the thing that is unique about the engobe glaze is that it can only be put on clay before it goes in the kiln. So it must be in the leather hard to bone dry state before it is applied. It cannot be applied to clay that has already been fired. And as you can see, that glaze gets actually baked on in the kiln. And you'll notice it's not shiny because it requires, like the underglaze, a clear coat, and then it will also go back into the kiln. Right? So just to review, your underglazes and your engobes can go on clay before it gets fired. Okay? This can only get put on, the engobe can only be put on before it gets fired. The underglaze can do either one, before or after. And both the engobe and the underglaze require a clear coat, or they will not come out glossy. The low fire has a clear coat already built in, and it gets fired at a lower temperature than your high fire. Okay? All of these glazes right here, they all get fired at a lower temperature than your Highfire. So these can all get put onto the same piece, whereas the Highfire glaze has to be put on separately with only Highfire glazes. Okay? I know this can get confusing, but as we work through the class, you'll understand how all of these glazes work and interact.